Buying an apartment that does not exist yet is a different transaction from buying one that does. You are not inspecting a property. You are buying a set of promises, secured by two statutes, priced by a formula, and delivered on a date that is almost never the date on the brochure. So here is what Israeli law actually gives you, what a developer's standard contract does to narrow it, and the numbers nobody puts in the brochure. Start with the framework because most English language writing on this gets it wrong in the first sentence. People refer to the sale law as though there were one. There are two, passed a year apart, doing different jobs. The 1973 law is the Disclosure and Quality Statute. It governs the specification, late delivery, and the compensation for it, defect liability, and the cap on the developer's legal fee. It is about what you are getting. The 1974 law is the money statute. It stops the developer holding your payments without security, and it is the law that gets your money back if the project fails. Both statutes are cognate, which means they can only be varied in your favor. A clause giving you less than the statute does is not a term you failed to negotiate. It is void, and it does not matter that you signed it. Which brings us to the lawyer in the room. The developer instructs a firm to draft the contract and run sales. Buyers deal with that firm and conclude a lawyer is involved. One is, not yours. That firm drafted the document and has no duty to tell you which clauses are one-sided. So, your money. An off-plan buyer typically pays out most of the price over 2 to 4 years before receiving anything at all. Section 2 of the 1974 law exists because that is an obviously dangerous position and because Israeli buyers have lost everything when developers failed. The rule is simple. A developer may not take more than 7% of the price without providing one of the securities the section prescribes. Everything after that must be secured as it is paid. There are 5 permitted securities: a bank guarantee in the prescribed form, an insurance policy in your favor, a first-ranking charge over the land, a cautionary note, or transfer of title itself. On any bank-accompanied project, the answer is the bank guarantee, and that is the one you want. The others turn up as supplements, and each needs reading rather than accepting. One thing changes shortly. From the 30th of September 2026, approved non-bank guarantors may issue these too. So who your guarantor is becomes a question worth asking. The mechanics matter more than the theory. The accompanying bank opens a dedicated escrow account for the scheme. Every payment goes in against a voucher issued for that specific payment, and a financing corporation must issue the matching guarantee within 14 business days. So if you are asked to pay outside the voucher system for any reason, stop. Money paid direct to the developer may simply not be secured, and chase the guarantees. Buyers abroad regularly find at month 18 that 3 were never issued. Now, the price, which is not the price, the headline figure is a base price. What you pay is that plus linkage to the construction inputs index. Until 2022 developers linked the entire unpaid balance, quietly adding tens of thousands of shekels. Amendment 9 changed that from the 7th of July 2022. The first 20% cannot be linked at all. Of every payment after that, no more than half. And linkage runs only to the contractual delivery date. Together, that caps exposure at 40% of the price. Take a 2.5 million shekel apartment, 20% at signature, and an index rising 6% across the build. Under the old regime, 2 million was exposed, and the uplift was 120,000. Under the cap, 1 million is exposed, and it is 60,000 shekels of difference on one apartment, which is why you check 3 things in your own contract: which index, what base date, and whether each payment is really split into a linked and an unlinked half, which leaves the date. Israeli developments run late, assume it. Section 5. It gives you compensation calculated against the rent a comparable apartment would command on 2 ladders depending on when you signed. From July 2022, the first month is a grace month. Months 2 to 4 run at 1 times rent, months 5 to 10 at 1.25, and from month 11 at 1.5. On an earlier contract, nothing for 60 days, then compensation retroactively from the original delivery date. It is cognate, so a term offering less is void. But the clause that does the real damage is not the delay clause, it is the delivery date clause. Many contracts never commit to a date at all. They commit to a period running from an event the developer controls, the building permit, commencement of works, completion of a prior stage. Expect a force majeure clause on top, drafted expansively. Ask what it requires them to prove, whether the extension is capped, and whether they must notify you. Because with no fixed delivery date, Section 5A has nothing to bite on, and the linkage cutoff has nothing to cut off against. Fix the date. That is the negotiation. Next, the specification, the contractual definition of your apartment. The brochure, the render, and the show apartment are marketing. If a feature is not in the specification or an agreed amendment, you have not bought it. Two jobs need doing on that document. Is what is written any good, which is a construction question, and is it enforceable, which is a legal one. A clause letting the developer substitute equivalent materials at its own discretion is a legal problem before an aesthetic one. Walk the show apartment with the specification in hand and ask which line each thing you like corresponds to. Those answers are your upgrade budget. Then tax, where OLIM are most often given the wrong answer. 4 ladders and the 2026 bands are frozen until January 2028. An OLE under Regulation 12A pays nothing to just under 2 million shekels, then 0.5%. A resident buying a single home pays nothing on the same band, then 3.5, then 5. An additional dwelling and a foreign resident pay 8% from the first shekel. And one detail repeatedly misstated. The OLE relief requires the apartment to be your only one in Israel. It does not require you to live in it. Put those on the same 2.5 million shekel apartment. The OLE pays 2,606 shekels. Nothing on the first band, 0.5% of the 521,000 above it. A resident buying a single home pays 20,500. An additional dwelling or a foreign resident pays 200,000. So the OLE rate is not a modest concession. It is a different order of number, and there is a trap in the timing. Purchase tax is triggered by the transaction, not the keys. In an off-plan purchase, the transaction date is the contract date, and the declaration is due within 30 days. So you pay tax on an apartment you will not occupy for 2 or 3 years. Budget it as a signature cost. And if you are buying ahead of Aliyah, model the 12A window, the 2-year rescue rule, and the delivery date together before you sign. The order in which you buy, arrive, and complete can be worth 6 figures. Doing this from another country, start with financing. Directive 329 sets the ceilings. 75% for a single dwelling, 70% for a replacement home, 50% for an additional one. That 50 is the figure quoted to foreign buyers, and it is worth being precise. The directive imposes 50 on an additional dwelling. It says nothing about foreign buyers. Israeli banks adopted it for non-residents as internal credit policy, and staff present it as regulation. It is not. Citizens abroad and buyers completing Aliyah within about 2 years are regularly financed at 75. If the first answer is 50, ask on what basis, then ask a second bank. Then financing something that does not exist. You cannot mortgage an unregistered parcel, so the bank takes a cautionary note plus the developer's undertaking and draws down in stages against the vouchers. Your approval in principle will expire mid-build and need renewing at that day's terms, and get a narrowly drafted power of attorney in place early, because opening an Israeli account as a non-resident is very often the item on the critical path nobody scheduled. After you sign, there is a long gap between owning the right to an apartment and owning the apartment. The land must be subdivided and the building registered as a condominium before your name appears in the taboo. Both are the developer's job and both take years. Meanwhile, you hold a cautionary note and your guarantees, a real position but not registered title, require a long stop date with a consequence, and know this one because almost nobody tells buyers. Section 6C caps what a developer can charge you towards its own lawyer's registration costs at the lower of 5,000 shekels or 0.5%. Defects run on 2 consecutive periods. The inspection period runs from delivery, 1 to 7 years, depending on the defect, with the burden on the seller, then a 3-year warranty period where the seller is still liable, but the burden reverses onto you. It depends on notice. Notify in writing, dated with photographs, and give the developer the chance to repair. If you let the apartment out, put a reporting duty on the tenant. A remote owner with a tenant in place is how a 7-year protection quietly runs out. Handover is a legal event, not a celebration. The delivery protocol records the condition of the apartment as accepted, and it is the reference point for everything afterwards. Confirm the occupancy approval is in place and instruct an independent surveyor, mandatory if you are buying remotely. Record every discrepancy in the protocol and photograph it, and never sign a general acknowledgement that the apartment conforms when it does not. If you cannot attend, send someone with authority. A video call cannot sign a protocol and cannot refuse to. So before you sign, you should be able to answer these without looking anything up. Who is selling and do they own the land? Whether every payment goes in against a voucher, which index, what base date, whether the delivery date is fixed or floating, which tax ladder applies, and whether you have budgeted it for day 30, and whether you have your own lawyer acting for you alone who has read the contract. None of this makes off-plan a bad way to buy. It is often the best way, particularly from abroad, because there is no chain, and the payment schedule is known in advance. It simply rewards preparation more than any other transaction in this market. Everything here is covered in more depth on the channel and in the written guide. Take your own advice from someone acting for you and nobody else.